What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the fifth album by German band Rammstein. Basically, this project is called Rosenrot or Rose Red in English, and this album came out in the fall of 2005. Now, the particular thing about Rammstein is just the fact that they have a number of popular albums out in the international vibes as far as that kind of happens. They do have some popularity in the United States. I don't know how well this album sold in the United States. I think it probably went at least gold or something like that, 500,000 copies, something of that assortment. It says on Wikipedia that this album sold a million. It says on Wikipedia it took this album about 4 months to sell a million copies globally. So as far as that kind of happens, this is a pretty popular album. It's definitely one that I wanted to check out by Rammstein just to kind of see what they're about and that type of stuff. And this is a pretty good introductory album to kind of have by them. I definitely like the appeal of it. It has a lot of good fast-paced kind of industrial metal and just overall good vibes that it just kind of have. This album just has like a lot of gritty, grimy, and just overall skittery type vibes that are pretty awesome. Just what I'd say. It's very similar to like Power Man 5000, a little bit of Rob Zombie and Marilyn Manson in there, and folks like them, folks like Orgy and some of those type folks. I mean, it's almost kind of electro, but it's just kind of more industrial and like a kind of real sheer, kind of shrill metal sense as far as that kind of happens. Definitely like the vibe of it. Now, I'm not going to do like the lyric translation, so that's about if you're. I'm just going to review this album at face value, so I'm not going to really translate the lyrics as far as what the songs are talking about in that sort of sense, but it is pretty heavy hitting music, I would have to say. It definitely has some pretty just atmospheric type vibes that just hit like a ton of bricks as far as that kind of happens. Definitely the great band work on here. Just have to say this band overall does an excellent job. The vocalist is pretty moody. The vocalist of Rammstein is definitely pretty moody, so I like the concept of just about seeing that and that sort of thing. So it's a good concept to kind of get here. I think this is probably one of Rammstein's better albums. I don't know for certain quite yet because this is like the first album I've listened to by Rammstein, but I would definitely have to say I just like the overall kind of industrial metal, kind of alternative rock type pitch that this album particularly kind of has. Just a good pitch overall. Instrumentation's pretty great, and I just would have to say the singles are pretty excellent too. That's another great thing about this particular project is just the fact that the singles are so heavy hitting and just deliver quite well. I would have to say this wouldn't. I would definitely think if we could get like an English band to kind of translate this, just get the instrumentals of these particular songs and translate it to English, just the exact lyrics or just something within that relative pitch to kind of have that be a pretty excellent thing, just to kind of give credit to Rammstein as far as that kind of goes. But I do like hearing it the way that it is. It really feels like a good. This really kind of feels like a pretty sheer band to kind of have. I just like their overall kind of drawing and just overall sprawling kind of looming type energy. They're basically like a kind of industrial metal version of something like Korn, something like that. It's just interesting that this band has so many haunting tunes on here because I just look at the concept as far as this kind of goes. This is definitely a pretty industrial album, but it does have a pretty good grim sense as far as that kind of happens. So it's just a good thing to pay attention to. Great music for September, October, November, and stuff like that, I'd have to say. So talk about the singles on here. They're going to be in the English names, I would have to say. So the first single is Gasoline. The first single is Gasoline, and this is basically like a spooky, grim kind of industrial metal highlight. I would have to say it's skittery, and the song is skittery and murky, I would have to say, and it's just some great autumn music. So I definitely like this one. Just a good introduction to the album, I would have to say. Yeah, Gasoline just has like a lot of good snappy appeal as far as that kind of happens. Just a great marketed single. I feel like Gasoline is a pretty marketable single in terms of being released to radio as far as that kind of happens. I definitely feel like this is pretty similar to Marilyn Manson as far as that kind of happens. Just a real kind of radio ready type tune that just has that. Gasoline is just like a real radio ready type tune that just has like the perfect snap and just overall approach and just abrasiveness that just is necessary for metal as far as that kind of happens. Just a real kind of in your face type one that just does a lot of damage and just overall has a catchy kind of vibe that just is pretty affable overall, I'd have to say. The next single, Rosenrot, which is also the second single, Rose Red, is basically like a brewing kind of evening highlight, I would have to say. It's got a steady guitar riff and it's just a nice hazy industrial gem, I would have to say. So this is the first song I listened to by Rammstein. I definitely have to say this is a pretty nice one. Really like the overall kind of murky feels of this particular one. It's a little bit more low key than Gasoline. And I feel like this one's just a little bit more steadfast. This definitely kind of for Rose Red is definitely one for like some highlighted sense as far as just like the makeshift kind of after hours of like 4:30, 5:30 p.m., something like that. Just something dusky and twilight like, I would have to say. Just a good one for that sort of sense. This really has like a great riff on here. Just a real kind of this real kind of stringent kind of one that just really has like a real steadfast type pace about it that just works pretty damn heavily. It just is a great overall band work on here, and just the vocals on here are really excellent also. It's just a good type tune. Rose Red seems like a single that caught like a lot of airplay back in the day, so it's definitely a pretty highlighted one and just an overall good song to kind of hear, and especially in like foreign and kind of more international rock music as far as that kind of happens. Just a nice one. And then Man Against Man is another highlight. This is the third single off the album. This is basically like a brooding kind of moody track similar to Nine Inch Nails' Closer, I would have to say. similar to Nine Inch Nails' Closer, I would have to say is just a nice shrouded kind of bubbler. Definitely like this one. It's just a real kind of murky type one. All of these singles are kind of murky. Definitely like the snap and this overall band work that these songs particularly kind of portray. Just some real good stuff as far as that kind of happens. Really like the kind of moodiness and this overall brewing type feels of some of these. Is there some great ones for like night venues and just overall kind of just shrouded kind of energy that just hits a pretty good peak and highlight as far as that kind of happens. I definitely am curious about more Rammstein albums. I just question if this just had to do with like the emo and kind of more kind of moody pitch of like the angst and anguish of like the 2000s, or if they really had songs like this back in the 90s, because they were from the 90s as far as that kind of went, as far as that kind of goes. But I just would have to say the singles are all excellent, really kind of showcase the album in a pretty highlighted light. I would have to say just overall great time and just some good vibes. Like once again, I do wish that there was like an English translation of these, but I do have to say I just would have to look them up, or you just would have I just would have to say just look up the lyrics to kind of translate and see what you think of them as far as that kind of happens. But I just would have to say these are some excellent times, definitely, and they showcase the album in a pretty good highlighted sense. These songs showcase the band in a pretty good highlighted sense, I would have to say, and it's just overall sheer stuff. And this is definitely something I wouldn't mind hearing on like rock radio around these parts in the United States as far as that kind of happens. This is just some pretty shrouded stuff. So yeah, in terms of that, like there's 11 songs on this particular album. So there's 11 songs on this particular album, and out of those 11, I wound up recommending to you 7. So that's pretty damn good. The only 4 songs I don't recommend would just be song number 4, song number 5, song number 9, and song number 10. That's basically those 4 songs would be Jump, Where Are You, I Love You Bitch, or I Love You Whore, and then Fire and Water. So to talk about some of those, I kind of felt like the kind of Spanish, German type song, I Love You Whore, which is basically in Spanish the song title, I would have to say. This one just didn't translate quite as well. This one was just kind of a poor one, trying to blend like Latin type music with industrial type music with that type of stuff. Just didn't really have a good pitch as far as that kind of happens. Fire and Water was kind of being like a power ballad that just took some. There were a couple poor power ballads on here. Both Fire and Water and Jump were just kind of ones that just had some arrangements I didn't really enjoy as much. Those just didn't deliver quite as well as they needed to. I just kind of felt like the instrumentation was not quite as snappy and overall as catchy as like some of the singles and some of the shorter songs as far as that kind of happens. And then Where Are You was kind of. And then Where Are You was just a poor electronic type song that just didn't deliver quite as well as it needed to. That one was just kind of a poor rendition of some electronica type music. I think they probably needed to take a better page out of Orgy's playbook or something like that just to kind of deliver upon that better. Just the melodies and just overall arrangements of that song just didn't really hit as well. But yeah, to talk about some of these other songs, like a couple good ones on here, like Don't Die Before I Do is a really nice one. This is kind of like a glazed kind of Don't Die Before I Do is like a glazed kind of alternative rock pep, I would have to say. It's makeshift similar, and this is just some nice autumn haze, I would have to say. It's just a real kind of shrouded one that kind of reminds me of something that like folks like Trapped or folks like that would kind of do, Trapped or Korn or some of those type folks. Just kind of more just typical kind of second, third single on like a alternative metal type album that just kind of has that malaise sort of sense that you'd hear at like 4:30, 5:30 p.m. as far as that kind of happens. This one just felt like an alternative metal kind of makeshift highlight. Definitely like the pitch that one. I mean, yeah, it's just an overall nice one. Don't Die Before I Do is just an overall nice one. And then Destroy is a really nice highlight. This is like a raged kind of metal highlight similar to Marilyn Manson type stuff. I would say that it has. And then Destroy is a pretty rave highlight. This is definitely like a raged kind of metal highlight similar to Manson Energy, I would have to say. It's just a dark rave club hit, and it's just overall some manic kind of fun, I would definitely have to say. They definitely needed more songs with the craziness pitch of this particular one. I know that Rammstein can get pretty crazy. I definitely like the concept of seeing some of that. I feel like songs like Rose Red and Gasoline are 2 other ones that are kind of at least somewhat crazy in that sort of pitch, but I definitely feel like Destroy is just one of the overall highlighted ones on here. They definitely, I mean, this is kind of a snappy kind of album. This is kind of a snappy album, but there pretty much should have full-blown been more songs like Destroy, I would have to say. This sort of energy is just, it's a sin that there was just not more songs conveyed with this sort of raged kind of energy that this particular song kind of had. It's just kind of the aspect about it. There are some other malaise type songs on here. I feel like a song and Help Me are 2 ones in that sort of pitch. I feel like a song, the last song you hear on here is basically like a malaise kind of makeshift stretch of a song, I'd have to say. The song is just great for late summer, I would have to say. Late summer, early autumn, something like that. And it's just a good, this song is just some good grim workaday moodiness, I would have to say. Just an overall nice one. Really like the malaise type feel. This is another kind of late single type feel as far as that kind of happens. There's just a lot of malaise ones on here. This is just a very grim kind of album to hear in like September, October. Definitely like the pitch. This is is just some great grim kind of music to hear in like September, October. Definitely like the moody type pitch of most of these songs on here. It's just a very ghastly album, just even right down to the album cover. Just is a very haunting type feel. That this is great for the end of the year and that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. And then Help Me is a pretty good one. This is something that I'd expect. Help Me is something I'd expect out of Korn's fold. I would definitely have to say this is like a fluorescent kind of feeling. I would have to say Help Me is definitely something I'd expect out of Korn's fold, something like that. This just has like a real fluorescent kind of feeling. This is a fluorescent kind of feeling haze of a song. I'd have to say just a solid ground level spook of a time, definitely. And it's just a backyard kind of party hit. So this is definitely one I could see just smoking a few stogies in the backyard, something like that, having a barbecue in like September, October, when the weather's kind of cooler and it's kind of more jacket and hoodie season, that type of stuff. Just having some good autumn weather, kind of hot dogs and burgers and stuff like that. Just some solid tunes to kind of smoke a few to and that type of stuff. Just a real kind of carnivorous type haze that Korn or Mushroom Head or folks like that would kind of do something in that sort of pitch. Orgy or those type folks as far as that kind of happens. Just a real kind of grim one. Definitely like the concept of it. So overall, I would have to say that Rammstein is a pretty haunting band. Definitely like the pitch of it. They kind of go in between like Korn and Marilyn Manson and bands like those. Just overall have that particular type ghastly type pitch as far as that kind of happens. It's great for autumn weather, great for cooler weather, that type of stuff. Just some real grim kind of makeshift type tunes to kind of hear in just the times when you're going to work and it's cooler out as far as that kind of happens. Just some great energy. This is really too bad there's not more songs like Destroy and kind of Rose Red and some of those type ones, I would have to say. But the overall energy is pretty pitch. I just would have to say it's just a great time. It's just got real affable kind of vibes that it gives, and it's just an overall one that should get you pretty kinetic and just exhilarated as far as that kind of happens. But yeah, just to say, as far as what I'm going to score this album, me basically recommending 7 songs out of 11 on this particular album. I'm going to go ahead and give this album me recommending 7 songs out of 11 on this particular album. I'm going to go ahead and give this album like a 7.75 out of 10. I feel like I would give it a higher score, but the concept about it, I would give this album like a higher score, like an 8 out of 10. But the thing about it is when there's a small amount of songs and there's a number of songs that you don't enjoy, it kind of narrows down the score a little bit. So it's kind of the concept. If there had been more songs like Destroy and there had been a few more album quality highlights, and if they had nailed like the power ballads a little bit better and stuff like that, and just kind of had like some more, just maybe 1 or 2 more strengthy kind of album cuts as far as that kind of happens. Definitely songs like Destroy, another song like Rose Red, another song like Gasoline, definitely something like that. Even another song like A Song, something like that. I would have definitely said that could have probably pretty much been the pitch about it. But this is just basically some minor complaints as far as that kind of happens. But just because there's not a lot of songs, it still manages to detract from the score. So that's just kind of thing. With the social score, I'm going to go ahead and give like an 8.75 out of 10 too, because I feel like a lot of these songs hit pretty heavily. This is just a great social, affable time, especially for like cooler weather, like the fall and the winter and that type of stuff. As far as that kind of happens, they have some great energy when they do wield it properly. As far as that kind of goes, it's great overall pitches, great moodiness, great character. As far as that kind of happens, they have some guests on here, stuff like that. So it's just got a lot of burst of energy that just hits pretty heavily, I would have to say. So 8.75. In terms of the future, like Rammstein dropped an album like in 2022, so I know they put that out. They don't always drop albums all the time. It's kind of spare when they do. It's just kind of a once in a blue moon type situation as far as it kind of happens. So I am gonna get to some more of these, but this was a pretty enjoyable highlight here, I'd have to say, and I do recommend it.